6:15 a.m., October 3, 1978, 8 tractors. Bill Henderson's 1955 Farmall Super M was leaking hydraulic fluid. 480 acres of corn needed harvesting. 72 hours before the first freeze would destroy everything. Every equipment dealer in 3 counties said he needed to upgrade to compete. Henderson owed $2,400 to First National Bank. The harvest was worth $18,600. Lose the corn, lose the farm, lose everything his grandfather had carved from prairie in 1891. What happened next violated every modern farming principle. Embarrassed 8 brand-new tractors, and accidentally proved an engineering theory that John Deere's research department had dismissed as impossible. This is a story of 8 tractors. Henderson had 3 choices. 2 would bankrupt him. October 1978. The Corn Belt was modernizing fast. Case IH-2590s ruled the fields. 130 horsepower, climate-controlled cabs, power shift transmissions. Henderson's Farmall, 55 horsepower, no cab, manual everything. "Dad, you're fighting a losing battle," said his son Mike. "Banks offering financing on a new case. Payments only $847 a month." Bill listened, then walked to the machine shed. The Super M sat there, red paint faded to pink in spots. Hydraulic leak pooling beneath the rear axle. Oil seepage from 3 different gaskets. Temperature gauge reading high even when cold. You'd think Henderson would start with the hydraulic leak. The obvious problem. He didn't. He started with the carburetor, which seemed insane until you understood what he'd observed during morning chores. Choice 1, rent modern equipment. Cost, $2,400 for 3 days, profit margin gone. Choice 2, emergency repair loan. Interest rate, 18.5%. Monthly payments for 7 years. Choice 3, make the Farmall do what engineering said was impossible. Henderson chose option 3, but option 3 required violating laws of physics. Here's what Henderson didn't know. The modification he was considering had been attempted before, in 1971, by a farmer named Rodriguez in Nebraska. Rodriguez's tractor caught fire. He lost 200 acres and spent 6 months in the hospital. The Super M's 6-cylinder engine produced exactly 55 horsepower at 1,800 RPM. Mathematics were simple. Henderson needed to harvest 480 acres in 72 hours. That required 65 continuous hours of operation. Impossible with 1 tractor. Or 38 hours if he could increase power output by 45%. Standard procedure said engine modifications meant catastrophic failure. Henderson disagreed with standard procedure. "You'll blow the head gasket in 30 minutes, warned County Extension Agent Earl Murphy. Henderson's response, "Then I'll get 30 minutes I wouldn't have otherwise." But Henderson had noticed something 3 mornings earlier. The engine sound changed at precisely 1,750 RPM, a frequency shift so subtle most operators missed it. Henderson didn't miss it. While Henderson was preparing his impossible modification, 340 miles south in Kansas, a mechanical engineer named Chen was about to make the same discovery, independently. They'd never meet, but their solutions would be identical in one critical way, and catastrophically different in another. The Super M's cast iron block had one advantage Henderson understood better than International Harvester's designers. The cooling system was over-engineered for 55 horsepower, which meant higher compression ratios were theoretically possible without thermal failure. You think Henderson would boost fuel injection pressure? The obvious modification. Actually, he did the opposite. He restricted fuel flow. Precisely, using a needle valve and 40 minutes of careful calibration. Most farmers who later copied Henderson's technique failed because they copied what they could see. Henderson's genius wasn't what he added. It was what he removed, something invisible unless you knew where to look. 6:47 a.m., Henderson fired the engine. First attempt, normal startup. Second attempt, he engaged the modification. The Super M's exhaust note dropped an octave, deeper, throatier. The whole machine vibrated differently. Power takeoff RPM climbed past red line. Time, 4:15. The impossible was happening. Henderson's hands trembled as he engaged the clutch. The corn head bit into the standing crop. You could hear the difference immediately. Not the labored groaning of an overworked engine, but smooth, relentless power. The smell of diesel exhaust mixed with corn dust, the steady rhythm of kernels hidden in the grain tank. First hour, 23 acres. Normal pace was 14. Hour 2, 22 acres. The modification held. Hour 3, 24 acres. The engine was actually getting stronger. By 10:30 a.m., news had spread. Farmers arrived to watch. Time 450, Jim Walsh brought his new case 2590. Let's see your antique keep up with 130 horsepower. Side-by-side comparison, Henderson's 1955 Super M, 47 acres in 3 hours. Walsh's 2590, 41 acres in 3 hours. Walsh shut off his tractor, walked over to Henderson. "What the hell did you do to that thing?" Henderson smiled, made it remember what it was built for. But Henderson's success created a problem nobody anticipated. Word spread across 5 counties. By afternoon, 17 farmers had called asking about the modification. Henderson explained the process to 3 of them. All 3 attempted it within 48 hours. Results: Farmer 1, success, gained 35% power increase. Farmer 2, engine seizure after 4 hours. Farmer 3, catastrophic failure, connecting rod through the block. The difference? Henderson had used a specific needle valve, part number 394847R1 from a 1953 Super H. The others used modern automotive needle valves. Threading was different. Flow characteristics were different. Remember that frequency shift Henderson noticed 3 mornings earlier? That wasn't engine roughness. It was harmonic resonance. At exactly 650 RPM, the crankshaft, flywheel, and power takeoff aligned in a perfect mechanical harmony. Henderson's modification didn't add power. It eliminated the resistance that was absorbing 8 horsepower at normal operating speeds. If you want to understand how Henderson's frequency-tuned modification outworked 8 modern tractors, and why most farmers who copied it destroyed their engines within a week, keep watching. The answer involves an engineering principle so counterintuitive that International Harvester's own research department called it mechanically impossible when Henderson wrote to them in 1982. Hit that like button if you appreciate stories of farmers. Time, 300 miles who innovated when everyone said it couldn't be done. Hour 12, Henderson was ahead of schedule, 167 acres completed, engine temperature holding steady, no mechanical failures. Hour 18, the first breakdown, not Henderson's farmall, Jim Walsh's case 2590, transmission failure, 3400 repair bill. Hour 24, second breakdown, Tom Miller's John Deere 4430, hydraulic pump failure, 1-800 repair bill. Henderson's 1955 Super M kept running. Chen, meanwhile in Kansas, had achieved the same power increase. But Chen used a different needle valve, part 847392A from a 1959 farmall. 460. Similar flow rate, different pressure characteristics. October 6th, 2:15 p.m. Chen's engine exploded. The connecting rod punched through the block with such force it embedded in the barn wall 18 feet away. Chen survived but lost 3 fingers and spent 8 weeks in the hospital. The 460 was total loss. Henderson never learned about Chen's accident. If he had, he might have understood how close he'd come to the same fate. Hour 36. Henderson reached the halfway point. 240 acres completed. 12 neighbors had gathered to watch. The impossible was becoming routine. Earl Murphy, the county agent who'd predicted catastrophic failure, arrived with a stopwatch and clipboard. "I need to document this for the extension office. They won't believe it otherwise." Henderson's average, 6.7 acres per hour. Sustained. No breakdowns. Industry standard for 55 horsepower tractors. 4.1 acres per hour. Henderson wasn't just competing with modern equipment, he was embarrassing it. Hour 48, the real test began. Temperature dropped to 31 degrees. Frost warnings issued. Henderson had 24 hours to finish or lose everything to freeze damage. The Super M's engine had been running at 115% capacity for 2 full days. Bearings were hot. Oil pressure marginally low. Any rational farmer would shut down for maintenance. Henderson increased throttle settings. The modification wasn't just holding, it was getting more efficient as temperatures dropped. Hour 54. Henderson discovered the hidden benefit. Cold air increased engine efficiency by 12%. The frequency tuning effect became more pronounced. At 28 degrees ambient temperature, the Super M was producing an estimated 73 horsepower, more than some modern 80 horsepower tractors. Physics said this was impossible. Henderson's harvest said physics was wrong. Hour 60. 450 acres complete. 30 acres remaining. Victory was certain. Then the fuel pump failed. 2:47 a.m., October 6th. Frost forming on windshields. Henderson had 4 hours before freeze damage began. 30 acres to go. No spare fuel pump. Nearest parts dealer 45 miles away wouldn't open until 8 a.m. You'd think Henderson would drive to town, wait for the parts store, lose the race against weather. He didn't. He did something that violated common sense and saved his harvest. Henderson disconnected the fuel pump, rigged gravity feed from an auxiliary tank, manual throttle control, no fuel pressure regulation. This meant the engine could either run perfectly or destroy itself catastrophically within minutes. He started the engine. RPM climbed past safe limits. No governor control, no automatic shutoff if something went wrong. Henderson engaged the clutch. The Super M lurched forward with more power than it had ever produced. Final 4 hours. Henderson harvested the remaining 30 acres at an average of 8.1 acres per hour, faster than he'd ever worked, faster than the modern tractors managed even with perfect conditions. 6:45 a.m., last row complete, 480 acres harvested, 0 crop loss. One 1955 farmall that had outworked 8 modern tractors. Total operating time, 62 hours, 18 minutes. Henderson's gross profit, $6,200, enough to make the bank payment with $1,340 to spare. But the real victory wasn't financial. Henderson's modification spread across 7 states. Between 1978 and 1983, an estimated 847 farmers attempted the frequency tuning technique. International Harvester received 23 complaints about unauthorized engine modifications causing premature failure. The company issued Service Bulletin 78-134 warning against the practice. They didn't understand that Henderson's version worked and the copies didn't. In 1981, an IH engineer named Patterson investigated. He interviewed Henderson. Patterson's conclusion: Subject achieved power increase through harmonic resonance tuning using obsolete needle valve with specific flow characteristics. Modern replacement parts create excessive fuel pressure. Engine failure inevitable. Henderson's response: I didn't know the needle valve was obsolete. It's what my grandfather had in his parts bin. The hidden detail that made Henderson's modification work. Part 394847R1 was manufactured with a 0031-inch tolerance variance that was corrected in 1954. Henderson's valve, manufactured in 1953, had the defective tolerance. That defect created the precise fuel flow restriction needed for harmonic tuning. Farmers using modern needle valves couldn't replicate the effect. They created fuel starvation instead of frequency optimization. Henderson farmed until 1994. Sold to his son, Mike, the same Mike who'd urged him to buy modern equipment in 1978. The Super M still runs. The modification is still there. The 1953 needle valve is still there. Henderson died in 2003. He never knew his frequency tuning technique would be studied by agricultural engineers. He just knew it worked when everything else said it shouldn't. Today, time 300% collectors pay $15,000, $22,000 for restored Super M's. If you find one with a modified fuel system and non-standard needle valve, you might have a Henderson frequency-tuned tractor. Worth documenting, worth preserving. Worth remembering the farmer who proved that sometimes old equipment just needs to remember what it was built for. If this story reminded you why agricultural innovation often comes from farmers, not engineers, hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already, drop a comment. Have you ever seen vintage equipment outwork modern machinery? Where are you watching from? Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, Texas? Thank you for watching, and thank you for keeping Bill Henderson's impossible harvest alive in history.